The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, but he couldn't hide the smirk playing on his lips. And to my youngest son, Leo, he read from the will, I leave a conditional inheritance, to be unlocked only upon the successful completion of a series of tasks designed by his siblings, Marcus and Clara. My name is Leo Turner. I'm 38, and I was sitting in a leather chair that smelled of old money and new grief, listening to my father's will get turned into a circus act. My brother Marcus, a 45-year-old investment banker with a jaw tight from clenching it, gave me a look of pitying contempt. My sister Clara, 42, who'd married a surgeon and spent her days on charity boards, just examined her manicure as if the whole thing was a bore. These tasks, Peterson continued, his voice dripping with false solemnity, are designed to build character and demonstrate his commitment to the family legacy. A low chuckle escaped Marcus. Let's see if he's got any character to build, he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I said nothing. I just sat there, my hands folded in my lap, feeling the familiar weight of their condescension. It was a weight I'd carried my whole life. The unambitious one, the dreamer, who fixed old clocks in a dusty workshop instead of chasing a six-figure salary. My father, Richard Turner, had passed away 2 weeks ago. He was a civil engineer, a man who built bridges, but he was a tinkerer at heart. He loved old machines, maritime history, and classical cryptography. He saw the world as a series of beautiful, intricate puzzles. Marcus and Clara saw his hobbies as eccentricities, wastes of time. I saw them as the language we shared. And now, that language was being used to humiliate me. The first task, Peterson announced, sliding a piece of paper across the polished mahogany table, is to personally clean and empty our father's home workshop. All contents to be disposed of by a sanitation company by Friday. Clara finally looked up. Don't forget to wear gloves, Leo. It's filthy in there. I took the paper, stood up, and nodded once. Understood. No arguments. No protests. Just the quiet acceptance they'd always mistaken for weakness. As I walked out, I heard Peterson say, "He's taking it well." "He'll give up after the second task," Marcus replied. "He always does." They thought this was about breaking me. They thought it was about the money. They had no idea that my father had left me one final puzzle to solve. And they had no idea that I was the only one with the key. My dad was never a man for straightforward conversations about feelings. He showed his love through shared projects and quiet understanding. While Marcus was at football practice and Clara was at ballet, Dad and I would be in his workshop, hunched over the guts of a 19th-century ship's chronometer or trying to crack a cipher from an old book he'd found. Most people see a jumble of gears, he told me once, pointing to an old clock movement. They don't see the logic, the harmony. Everything has a purpose, Leo. You just have to be patient enough to find it. My siblings never understood that. To them, the workshop was just a garage full of junk. Why does he waste his money on all this old trash? Clara would ask my mother. Marcus just called me grease monkey and told me I'd never amount to anything if I spent all my time with Dad's toys. They resented the time I spent with him, and they resented that I understood a part of him they couldn't access. When I decided to open my own small shop restoring antique clocks and automata, they called it a pathetic hobby, not a career. They couldn't grasp that I was happy, that I found meaning in bringing forgotten things back to life. As Dad got older, he grew more withdrawn from them. Their visits became shorter, their conversations strained, always circling back to his health, his estate, his legacy. I knew they were pressuring him, talking to him about sensible investments and protecting his assets. About 6 months before he passed, Dad gave me a strange gift. It was an old, brass-cased nautical compass, heavy in the palm. It didn't work properly, the needle always pointed slightly off north. Every navigator needs a reliable compass, he said, his eyes twinkling. But a wise one knows that sometimes the most important direction isn't north. I thought it was just another one of his sentimental, cryptic gestures. I thanked him, put it on a shelf in my workshop, and didn't think much more about it. After the diagnosis came, the pressure from Marcus and Clara intensified. I'd visit Dad in the afternoons, and we'd talk about old projects, but I noticed new things. A document shredder in his office that he'd never had before. He started asking me strange questions about digital storage, about encryption. Just keeping my mind sharp, he'd say. The last time I saw him, his mind was clear. He gripped my hand, his knuckles bony but his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't let them win, Leo," he whispered. "The game is the game. Just remember how to play." At the time, I thought he was delirious. Now, standing in the cold silence of his workshop, surrounded by the ghosts of our shared past, I understood. This wasn't a humiliation. It was a message. And this first task wasn't a punishment, it was the starting line. The workshop was exactly as he'd left it, organized chaos. Lathes, drill presses, shelves overflowing with gears, springs, and half-finished projects. To my siblings, it was a mess to be thrown away. To me, it was a library of memories. I spent the first day just taking inventory, carefully boxing up tools and instruments. This wasn't junk, it was my father's life. By the second day, I'd cleared enough space to get to his main workbench and the bookshelf behind it. That's when I saw it. Tucked between a dusty manual for a milling machine and a history of the Panama Canal was a book he'd given me for my 16th birthday, The Code Book by Simon Singh. I pulled it down, a strange feeling prickling at the back of my neck. I ran my thumb along the edge of the pages. There, almost imperceptible, were tiny pencil marks on the foredge of the book. A sequence of numbers. Not a page number, but a code. It was a book code, a type of cipher we had studied together years ago. The first number was the page, the second was the line, the third was the word. My hands trembled slightly as I sat at his workbench and began the painstaking work of decoding it. It took over an hour. As the words formed, a chill ran down my spine. The will is a lie. Peterson is with them. Trust the compass. The key is father's pride. The will is a lie. The words echoed in the silent workshop. He knew. He knew what they were planning. And he'd left me a map. Trust the compass. I immediately thought of the broken compass he'd given me. But what was father's pride? My mind raced. Was it a boat? A project? Then it hit me. Father's Pride was the name of the first leaky fishing boat we bought together at a junk auction and spent an entire summer restoring. It was the password for the Vigenère cipher we used to use when I was a kid, a cipher system he knew Marcus and Clara would dismiss as childish nonsense. I went back to the book. There was another, longer encrypted message on the inside back cover, written in faint pencil. I took out a notepad and, using FATHRSPRID as the keyword, I began to decrypt it. The message that emerged was my father's final instruction: compass base twists counterclockwise. 3 full rotations. Then press the needle. I drove back to my workshop, my heart pounding in my chest. I took the heavy brass compass from its shelf. It looked exactly as it had before, an old, useless navigational tool. I held it in my hands, remembering my father's words: sometimes the most important direction isn't north. I gripped the base and twisted. It was stiff, but it moved. 1 full rotation. 2. On the third, I heard a soft click. My breath caught. I gently pressed the tip of the magnetic needle. With another quiet click, a tiny, almost invisible seam appeared on the side of the compass casing. I pried it open with my fingernail. Inside, nestled in a small cutout in the brass, was a micro SD card. I sat at my computer for a long time, just staring at the tiny black square in my palm. This was it. The culmination of his plan. I plugged the card into a reader and clicked on the single file it contained, for Leo.mp4. My father's face filled the screen. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp, defiant. He was in his study, the camera positioned on his desk. "Leo," he began, his voice calm and steady. "If you're watching this, it means you solved my little puzzle. I knew you would. You were always the one who paid attention. He paused, taking a sip of water. I'm afraid what I have to tell you is difficult. For the past year, Marcus, Clara, and my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, have been pressuring me to change my will. They wanted to place my assets into a trust that they would control, effectively cutting you out. They said it was to protect me from my own sentimentality. I knew it was about greed. He sighed. So, I played along. I let them think they were winning. The will they have, the one Peterson will read to you, is a fabrication I was forced to sign under duress. They believe it's ironclad. But they underestimated us, son. They always have. The camera angle shifted slightly. He picked up another device. This is a digital voice recorder. It's also a high-definition video camera. I've been recording my meetings with them for the last 3 months. The screen split. On one side was my father, on the other, a new video began to play. It was security footage from his study. The date stamp was from 2 months ago. Marcus, Clara, and Peterson were sitting across from my father. Just sign it, Dad, Marcus was saying, his voice sharp with impatience. It simplifies everything. We'll make sure Leo gets a small allowance, enough to keep his little toy shop running. This scavenger hunt idea is brilliant, Clara, Peterson said, laughing. He'll be so humiliated he'll forfeit his share before the first week is out. It's legally cleaner than cutting him out completely. Shows we made an effort. He's weak, Clara said, waving her hand dismissively. He'll fold. He needs us more than he's willing to admit. I watched, my blood turning to ice, as my father was coerced into signing the document. My father's voice returned on the main video feed. The original, notarized will, he said, holding up a sealed manila envelope to the camera, is in safe deposit box 734 at the downtown branch of City Central Bank. The key is taped to the underside of my old lathe in the workshop. This video, and all the recordings I've made, are your proof. This compass, Leo, is your inheritance. Not the money, not the assets. The truth. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes looking directly into mine. They tried to steal your future, son. And they used my memory as a weapon to do it. Don't let them. Do what's right. For both of us. The video ended. I sat in the darkness of my workshop, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears on my face. It wasn't about grief anymore. It was about justice. The next 2 weeks were a blur of calculated moves. I retrieved the safe deposit box key from under the lathe. I hired my own lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright who specialized in estate fraud. We retrieved the real will and made certified copies of all the video and audio evidence. Meanwhile, I played my part. I received my second task from Peterson via email: catalog every book in your father's library and provide a notarized list of first editions. It was a tedious, pointless task designed to frustrate me. I did it without complaint. The third task was even more absurd: write a 5,000-word essay on the Turner family's contribution to the city's architecture, a history I knew Marcus and Clara had invented to make themselves sound like old money. I wrote the essay, filled with dry, emotionless prose, and submitted it on time. With each completed task, their confidence grew. I could hear it in Peterson's voice when he called. Just one final meeting to settle the estate, Leo. We'll be at the firm's main conference room on Friday to sign the final disbursement papers. He meant the papers where I would officially forfeit my claim. Friday arrived. I walked into the conference room at Peterson's firm. Marcus and Clara were already there, sitting on one side of a massive table, looking smug. Peterson sat at the head. Leo, glad you could make it, Marcus said, not bothering to stand. We've decided, out of the goodness of our hearts, to offer you a final settlement of $10,000 to waive any further claims. A little seed money for your shop. Clara smiled sweetly. Think of it as a parting gift. For all your hard work on the tasks. I placed my briefcase on the table and sat down opposite them. "That's very generous," I said, my voice even. "But before we sign anything, I have something I'd like to share. A final project my father and I were working on." Their smiles faltered, replaced by confusion. I opened my briefcase and took out my laptop and a small projector. "The conference room has a screen, correct?" I asked Peterson, who just stared, dumbfounded. "What is this, Leo?" Clara asked, her voice sharp. "We don't have time for your little home movies." "Oh, I think you'll want to see this one," I said, connecting the laptop. I aimed the projector at the large white wall at the end of the room. I clicked play. My father's face, clear and resolute, filled the wall. "Leo," his voice boomed in the silent room. "If you're watching this, it means you solved my little puzzle." Marcus shot to his feet. "What the hell is this?" "Turn it off." Clara's face had gone pale. Peterson was fumbling with his phone, his hands shaking. I didn't say a word. I just let the video play. The scene of them in my father's study appeared on the wall. Their own voices filled the room, plotting, laughing, mocking me. "He'll be so humiliated he'll forfeit his share. Legally cleaner than cutting him out. He's weak. He'll fold." Clara let out a small, strangled gasp. Marcus looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Peterson sank into his chair, his face ashen. My father's voice returned, narrating their downfall from beyond the grave. He detailed the location of the real will, the coercion, the fraud. He ended by looking straight into the camera. "My estate is to be left in its entirety to my son, Leo Turner. He is the only one who understood its true value. As for Marcus, Clara, and Mr. Peterson, I trust the authorities will find these recordings of interest." The video ended. The room was deathly silent, except for Clara's ragged breathing. I stood up and placed a folder on the table. "That was a copy," I said calmly. "My lawyer, Ms. Albright, has the originals, along with the real will. She is filing them with the probate court as we speak. She is also handing over the evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud to the district attorney's office." Marcus stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "You..." he stammered. "You planned this?" "No," I said, looking him directly in the eye for the first time without a trace of intimidation. "Dad did. I just followed his instructions." I turned and walked to the door. As I opened it, 2 uniformed police officers and 2 plainclothes detectives were waiting in the hall. Ms. Albright stood beside them, a grimly satisfied look on her face. "That's them, detectives," she said, pointing into the conference room. The payback was swift and absolute. The fraudulent will was thrown out. The real will was executed, making me the sole heir to my father's estate. Marcus, Clara, and Peterson were all charged with conspiracy, fraud, and extortion. Facing irrefutable video evidence, they all took plea deals. Peterson was disbarred and served 2 years in prison. Marcus lost his banking license and his reputation, forced to sell his mansion to pay legal fees. Clara's surgeon husband divorced her to distance himself from the scandal. They lost everything because they were so sure I was nothing. A year later, I sold my father's house and used the inheritance to buy a larger commercial space. I didn't open a bigger clock shop. I founded the Turner Foundation for Mechanical Arts, a non-profit that teaches young people the crafts of watchmaking, metalworking, and restoration, the useless hobbies that my father and I had loved. On the main wall of the workshop, I hung a large, framed photograph of him, smiling, holding that old, broken compass. Sometimes, a student will ask me about it. "That was my dad," I'll tell them. "He taught me that some things look broken, but they're not. They're just waiting for the right person to figure them out." My siblings tried to take my inheritance, but my father left me something they could never touch, his legacy. And in the end, I didn't just win a game they forced me to play. I finished the one my father and I had been playing all along.